Good evening all and welcome. Tonight I have a really creepy collection of sleep paralysis and dream stories. It's not what you think, they're actually a hell of a lot scarier than you may expect. But please let me know in the comments what you think, as this is quite an obscure topic and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Before we jump in though, quick reminder that the Patreon promotion is wrapping up very soon. To get your vinyl stickers, your paper stickers, a letter from me in the mail, and lots of exclusive Patreon content, including an 80-minute narration, a fantastic story if I do say so myself, over on there if you want, link at the top of the description. But for now, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. This happened to my parents. My mum going off the deep end on Crazy Train isn't that out of character, but my dad doesn't do that ever, and he swears by this story. When I was around 2, my mum woke up from a nightmare, and she woke up my dad. He tried going back to sleep, but she told him not to, because his mother was about to call him, because a friend of theirs had been decapitated in some kind of accident. My dad, of course, thought this was nonsense, but my mum was in hysterics over it and couldn't sleep. Sure enough, a few minutes later the phone rang. It was his mum, letting him know that his friend, and the friend's little brother's girlfriend, had both died in a car crash coming home from a party about 3 miles away from us. My dad's mum and their family were very close, and my grandma, my dad's mum, and the mother from that family were lifelong friends, and she had just died 6 months or so. Anyway, we later learned that my dad's friend had been decapitated when he lost control in his ragtop Camaro, hit a tree, flipped the car upside down, and slid a ways on down the road. Neither he nor his younger brother's girlfriend were wearing seatbelts. This would have been back in 1981. I knew my uncle was going to die before he did. Basically, I had a dream. And in that dream, it was the first Christmas without my uncle. All this was about 2 months before he told us he had cancer, mind you. I thought it was just an awful dream. Then, of course, later down the line, he told us he had cancer. My dream instantly came to the forefront of my mind, but I didn't tell anyone. The first Christmas without him, 2 years later, played pretty much the same as that dream I'd had. A strange, ominous feeling of deja vu crept over me that day. But I never told anyone, for fear it would make me seem like I was making his death about me, if that makes sense. I just thought it was strange and creepy, and I've never had an opportunity to discuss it with anyone. What do you think? My uncle passed away some time ago to liver cirrhosis, but a few months before he died I saw a weird dream that I still remember quite clearly. In this dream there was my sister, me, my sister's deceased father who passed in 2016, and my uncle. Now, little note that my sister's father and uncle were best friends, and the dad was also pretty close with me. In this dream, I walked to an apartment and rang the doorbell. My sister's father opened the door and I walked in and saw my uncle and sister in there too. But my sister quickly left, as if she couldn't be there. I went into the kitchen and her father and my uncle were talking to me. But there was an invisible barrier in the middle of the floor that I couldn't cross. But the uncle and my sister's father were on the other side of it. My sister's dad hugged me and told me it was going to be alright. And then I woke up. The first thought I had when I woke up was that my uncle was going to die soon. Then, the week before he died, I saw a dream of my grandma being hospitalized. This is because my grandpa's mental state would drop when he'd die, and it did once he died, but otherwise she's okay. Then I woke up. The first thought I had, once again, is that my uncle is going to die, but it was stronger. I could tell the time had come. The night he died, I felt a sharp pain in the middle of my stomach, and I burst out crying for a reason I didn't know. I could also feel a familiar presence watching me, and I thought it was very odd. The following morning I heard a song on the radio, a song my uncle played for me when I was little, and the balcony door slammed open. An hour later, my mum called me and told me he had passed away. I've had a few experiences with sleep paralysis, and stuff like where I think I see a demon, or my soul is actually being claimed by Satan. But this one was different. I woke up in the middle of the night and could feel a presence to my left. It felt cold. It felt like an icy blue orb, and I could feel exactly where it was located. It didn't make much sense, because my bed was right up against the left wall, so it would have been floating in the air about 2 stories up. I hadn't even thought about moving, as its presence was so interesting, and I was entirely focused on that. It went through the wall. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. As it passed through the wall, it took form, somewhat like a human shape. Then it came around my bed to the bottom right corner. It crouched down and then jumped onto me, straddling me. I can't remember if I couldn't move before or just hadn't tried, but when it was on top of me, I definitely couldn't move at all. I was doing some work that night and had fallen asleep with my laptop, which was a little to my left and had fallen during the shifting of my sleep. It was angled towards me still, and the subtle glow from the illuminated screen allowed me to partially see this being. I couldn't make out the details because the being was translucent like glass, so I could only make out parts of it from the edges. I'm kind of arrogant, and like I've said, have been attacked in a similar fashion before, although this one was certainly the most brazen. So for some reason I actually wasn't scared and more annoyed. So then I felt it pull out a weapon like a dagger, and it tried to stab me in the center of my chest, but it didn't work, like I was wearing a bulletproof vest, and the dagger would not penetrate. Before, the way it moved and when it jumped happened fairly quickly, but by this time it was like we were telepathically linked in some way. I could feel its feelings, and it felt like it could feel mine. No words came from the being though, only emotions. I could feel its surprise and frustration when the dagger did not go through. The feeling of being also turned from blue to red, then a burning red. It kept trying to stab me over and over, never penetrating, and the being kept getting angrier and angrier, just super angry and frustrated, since it didn't work in the first few attempts. I was quite confident it wasn't going to work at all, so I began to sort of heckle it into my head, which I could feel it here was like, I give up already. It's gonna work, and stuff like that. This only made him angrier and stab faster, and after several attempts and me getting tired of it, I prayed. I was a Christian at the time, and as soon as I began praying, it sort of flew away and just turned into nothing. I'm a skeptic, and think most of the stuff that happened to me was probably due to sleep paralysis. But for all those experiences, I just remember them the next day. What makes me think this was an actual experience of some kind was that as soon as it flew away, I was still awake and I could move again. I felt it float away and stayed awake in a through-line fashion. I didn't wake up or go back to sleep since my laptop was right there. I spent the rest of the night Googling and trying to figure out what the hell just happened. Eventually I did fall back asleep. I checked my history the next day, and all the history of me trying to research what it was were all right there. That's probably the craziest experience I've had. I could feel it was shocked and surprised, like it thought it was going to be a quick and easy mission, but it wasn't. A few months ago in the middle of summer, I dreamt of a snow-covered forest. It was dark and the woods were asleep. There were plenty of tracks through the snow, and many of them were child-sized footprints. As I knew there was an orphanage nearby, the snow was muddy in places and squished under my feet. The orphanage was a big 2-story building with white walls. I could see nightlights on through the windows, but I stayed in the tree line waiting. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for until I saw it. A dark, black, mud puddle that seemed to be made of shadow. The mud slid to the side of the building and slowly started to slide up the side towards one of the windows. But I stopped it, sliding my hand into the mud, which was neither warm nor cold. I grabbed hold of something solid and pulled on the mud, dragging out a long, dripping sort of spine, thick with black mud that clung to my fingers. The more I pulled, the thicker it got, until a whole shadow stood in front of me, mud peeling back and dripping down until I could make out an animal's skull that appeared to be a wolf or dog's, but with bright, unsettling blue lights in the sockets and tall black horns. In my hand, I clutched the small end of a long, spiny, almost mangy tail. The air was still and silent as I stared at it. The thing had the lower half of a goat, but instead of fur, it had caked on mud that swirled and swished. Its torso and arms were hidden by the black mud. "Who are you?" it asked me. It sounded like the echo of a voice heard from far away, as if from some tall mountain. "How can you see me?" I tried to explain that I didn't know why I could see it, or what it was, but it seemed more fearful of me than I of it. So then I brought it to the tree line, its tail still in my hand, and we sat and spoke. It removed its skull, which it used as a mask, and the black mud fell to reveal a pale human form, pale and blue-tinted, as if it lacked blood. The eyes were the same empty blue light, and the horns stayed embedded in its head. He explained that he was a demon that feeds on life, by consuming the tiny bit that escaped when you dream of dying. He explained that they called these bits of life a fold, and they count each fold as a year of their own existence. He also referred to the mud on him as folds, and that his kind communicates with each other and breeds by mixing their folds. When I woke up, I could remember everything clearly, even the part where I told it I was going to wake up and that I hoped I'd see it again. I never got a name for it, but the closest thing I could find was a Japanese baku, which is a demon that eats dreams or nightmares. If anyone has any info, it would be greatly appreciated. At last year's Relay for Life at around 2 to 3 a.m., I was sitting with my friends and must have dozed off. I usually can't sleep, and at this moment I've been awake for over 48 hours. I guess I was sleepwalking, but my friends recalled me getting up, mumbling something and stumbling away. They thought I was just getting something from my car and coming back. I recall waking up at the parking lot near my car, laying on the ground, and as I get up, I take very small steps all the way to my car and back out again. I constantly wake up in my car in the middle of different roads, as my car is slowly rolling towards or parked. I live around 20 minutes away from the event, but I made it home at my house around 4 hours since I got away from my friends, so around 6 something in the morning. When I woke up in my bed, I was covered in blood and scratches, but my car was in perfect condition, so I did not get into a crash. The following days I asked everyone I was with that night if they recall me doing anything, but nobody knew what happened or how I'm alive. Sleepwalking really is terrifying. I've had an extremely hard time going to sleep, and also have a small history of sleepwalking when I was younger. I'm not sure if I'm insomniac or not, but truthfully, the event was quite frightening. It was 1989. Working as a technician, you kind of already see the stress. Coming home would be a blessing full of ease, having one kid at the time and being married to an industrious wife who made sure the house stayed neat and tidy, diapers changed, etc. I could say it was a huge relief. But what would make days like this greater were the walks in the large fields and woods that we had at a neighborhood park down the street and around the block. When we first moved here, I would occasionally go there for clearance, but that occasionally turned into additional after a couple of more stressful months. I would do the usual after I would reach the big field right before the entrance of the woods. I would take off my shirt/toes and lay down in the grass with my head facing the sky and let Mother Nature do her thing. Since you're hearing my story, then you know it's already a particular day for something horrible, but specifically something life-changing. Coming home after another painful and stressful day of work, I didn't even bother grabbing a quick snack. All I do this day is come home, kiss my wife and son, and tell my wife I will be back at 6 around usual, spending 3 minutes walking down the street talking to myself, and I would start my mind relaxing until I reached my destination and fully let my mind ease. I remember laying down on the grass and settling for 10 minutes to hear a faint whistle. 10 seconds after, I remember getting so tired I passed out, only to wake up to me being face down on the table at home. Looking out the window, I can see my wife outside with my son before I lay my head back down to go to sleep again, only to wake up 10 seconds later in the grass in the exact same spot I was in before I closed my eyes for the first time. By this time, my heart already had started to pump rapidly, but the drowsiness always got the better side of me. And before I was able to move, I would find myself drifting off into a quick sleep to find myself in the same spot, in the same position on my kitchen table, lifting my head up trying to push myself up, as if I was paralyzed from actually getting onto my feet. I was always defeated by my eyes getting heavy, and my head slamming down on the table, only to wake up in the same spot in the grass again. I couldn't get any type of process of what was happening and how I could stop it. The only process I could get at was how I was going to continue to live life. I couldn't keep count of how many times or how this had gone on, but I want to say for about 5 to 10 minutes before I woke up in a hospital bed with serious neck, head, back, and leg injuries. Something I noticed when I tried to shoot up is I was met with the paralyzation of heavy injuries and a nurse chiming in that I was awake. You would assume that I had been thrilled to the core and had every bit of confusion as to what the hell had happened. My heart was still pounding, not wanting to fall back asleep, hoping that the nightmare was over. It seemed like it was. The rest of this was a little blurry, until I had made a bit of recovery and was able to talk. At this time, my wife was on the bedside with me, and when my first words slipped out, I had asked her what happened, and why I was laying in total pain in the hospital bed. "You don't remember?" she replied. Supposedly, I had been in a fatal T-bone at an intersection coming home from a stressful day at work. The crash was so fatal, witnesses had thought I had died on the spot. But no, this was one of those miracles where the worst that happens to you as a driver is life-lasting impact injuries. But for me it was physical and mental scars. As you can guess, the mental scars got the best, which created questions as well as terrifying nightmares for me. I wasn't really able to get any sleep during this period of my life after the traumatic event, and was given sleeping pills as well as depression pills, anxiety pills to get my mental health better, which did hardly anything for me. With things like this, it's best to either try and give no thought to it, or just face it and find answers as to why such stuff happens and is part of your life. But for my job, sadly, it's disability. But it doesn't answer the questions as to what the hell happened. I can hardly keep a stable mind. I've tried to go through any simplification of what the hell I saw or hallucinated that day or how it even happened. Even the therapist was thrilled. To say the least, they're trained to be calm no matter what, but she had a look of horror on her face. It seemed like they tried their best to hold it, but I've told this story to other people, and you just know. If anyone has any explanation for what the hell happened to me, please, I'm all ears. I have been for years. My husband, friend and I were taking a 2-week trip through the UK. All 3 of us are Christian. One of the nights we were staying in this flat in London, I had a dream that I was shaking myself awake in the dream. When my dream self woke me up, they pointed to a dark corner to the right of me and said, "You need to pray. There's a demon in that corner." I woke up my husband and told him what I had dreamed. I said, "Let's not tell our friend because it could really freak her out, and maybe I just ate some bad food." Well, the next morning our friend comes into our room, sits on our bed and says, "Guys, I think we really need to pray. I had this dream where there was a demon in the corner there," and proceeds to point to the same corner I had dreamt about. Still gives me shivers to this day. I had a dream of a not-so-close university friend dying in a car accident. I met him the next day. We had an exam. He was laughing about how his arsehole friend lied to him. They were all going to travel to a seaside town, but left him to force him to attend his exam. A few minutes later, someone called him. These guys got into a car crash, and they all perished in the accident. I was 13 years old at the time, and living with my mum and stepdad in their 250-ish-year-old house. I had fallen asleep in the basement, but just to be clear, it's not what you're picturing. Their basement, while eerie, had a couple of big couches and a large TV. Definitely a leisure room. I woke up at one point in the middle of the night and couldn't move at all. My entire body was frozen except for my eyes, which were frantically flying around. I know this is standard sleep paralysis, and I've had it happen more times than I can count, but here is where it's got worse than usual. Their house was an old townhome in the city, narrow and very long, extending back. So I'm there on the couch in the middle of the night, completely frozen, unable to move, which is terrifying enough and horribly unsettling. And then down the hallway towards the back of the house is very dark because my mum had turned off the corridor light, and I could barely make out the back stairs. And I saw a figure walking towards me, a woman middle-aged at most, walking slowly and directly to me. Her face obscured by shadow, and I could only make out the faintest linen pants and blouse. Next thing I know, I felt hands closing around my throat and I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. But I was screaming in my head for what felt like an hour. Suddenly I could feel my limbs again and shot up off the couch. Not 5 seconds later, I was sprinting upstairs to my bedroom, too afraid to look behind me. And I never went back to that basement alone until I was an adult. And even then, it still creeps me out. I'm fairly into fitness, and especially at the time of this first dream. I was working at a supplement store and I had just purchased a new pre-workout with my generous staff discount. It had unapproved ingredients in it that are now banned, and I was sure this was messing up my sleep. Another customer who had become a friend of sorts had been taking it well, and we had both stopped taking it a week apart due to night terrors. But I'm still unsure if this has anything to do with my semi-frequent sleep paralysis dreams. I was living alone in a small one-bedroom apartment at this time. It starts off as a typical sleep paralysis episode. Heavy chest, feeling like I can't move or speak, and I feel like a presence is in my room. I finally opened my eyes, or so I thought. To the right of me, standing next to the bed, I see a small boy. He looked, well, dead. He had black around his eyes and an expression of complete emptiness. No emotion. I woke up and really opened my eyes. I still don't know if they were open to begin with or not. All of my sleep paralysis dreams felt this way. I never knew if my eyes are open, half open, or completely closed, but I always make out my surroundings exactly how they are. Not too long after this happened, another night, I felt the same presence in my living room. I had fallen asleep on the couch and saw what appeared like a dark shadow move from one end of the living room to the other. I couldn't move and tried my hardest to get a better view of it, but I simply couldn't. Shortly after, I heard a voice say something from the bathroom that I couldn't make out, which takes me to the next experience, which is by far the most terrifying. Not long after the first couple of episodes, my family and I headed to Dolphin Point, accompanied by my now fiancé, a holiday destination about a couple of hours from where I live. The first night we all played some board games, and after a while we retired for the night and got ready for bed. Not long after I fell asleep, I was again in a state of paralysis, but I could not see the room we were in. An old beachside shack with a few rooms. In a panicked state, I noticed a dark, shadowy cloud above the end of the bed. I freaked out to say the least and tried to wake up. My vision turned towards my fiancée while squirming to wake up, and then I hear her whisper to me, "Help me." She was facing me while she said this. This is when I realized, oh my god, is she in trouble? Is something here? I tried to scream but only managed to get out a faint, My fiancé realized I was having a nightmare and shook me awake. I woke up and asked, "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," she says. The strange part of it all was she told me she wasn't even facing me while she was sleeping. How could I see this room in my sleep without any prior visits to this place? Strange. This is why I wonder if I open my eyes during these episodes. Lately I've been having similar things happen to me before I sleep. Hearing loud knocking on what sounds like a large door. I awake to no noise. What sounds like a train speeding towards me at its peak, but I wake up to silence. I have dreams like Inception, as funny as that sounds. I will wake up in the exact spot I'm sleeping in, but still in the dream, to the point I don't know if I'm dreaming or not. I can't say I'm unhappy about my dreams. Sometimes I'm able to control them and have the ability to do what I like. I've flown through an empty black void. I've had many lucid dreams, some terrifying and others not so much, and wonder if at times I'm losing my mind. But I certainly hope not. I want to blame these occurrences on an over-imaginative mind, but I'm never quite sure. Back when I was around 9, I was at my grandparents' house for Christmas. We always stay overnight there on Christmas Eve. My grandparents, dad, and sister all got their own bedrooms, but I was stuck with a cot in the hallway of the basement. I remember waking up that night completely paralyzed. I could feel something large and heavy breathing on my back. My dad, who's a firm believer in the paranormal, said it was probably just the ghost of his old cat Onyx. A few months later, I'm staying at the grandparents' house again because I have a doctor's appointment in the city. This time, I get to sleep in the basement bedroom instead of the cot in the basement hallway. I assumed what had happened at Christmas was just my extreme fear of the dark, giving me an incredibly vivid dream, so I slept with the lamp on in the bedroom. Later that night, even with the lamp on, I wake up, again, paralyzed, back to the open closet, and feel something lay down next to me and start slowly stroking my back. Even now, I don't really know what it was. People have told me it sounds like classic sleep paralysis, but I'm not so sure. What do you guys think? I was talking with a medium about some life choices I'd made in the past. I had mentioned to the person that I had met a shady person when I was in high school that somehow knew about me and basically all the things I wanted to have in life. Needless to say, they were not good things to pursue despite the ends, and it would involve me in a life of crime, shady dealings, and a string of other things that I certainly don't regret getting myself into. In real life, I turned the guy down and went my way, and never saw that person again. So I looked at the medium and asked, "So, I don't regret choosing this path, but I would like to ask, what would have happened if I chose to follow this guy instead of walk away from him? I like to believe that I am set far enough away from this event that I had proven my point now, that clearly I did not choose to follow him. But since you're here, what can you tell me would have happened to me?" It was a very tempting offer after all, not gonna lie. The medium sat for a few moments and gave me a straightforward response. "You would not have lived to see your 27th birthday." As such, this answer threw me off. It was not really the answer that I was expecting to hear from someone like this. It honestly did not surprise me a whole lot. Back when I had this experience in high school, I had a thought enter my mind at the time that said something like this: "You can do whatever you want. You're the age now where you can do whatever you want and mum and dad can't stop you. Just remember one thing. When you go into an operation like this, there's no backing out." I immediately imagined myself trying to back out as I shook the devil's hand, and how no matter where I turned, they were always in pursuit or looking for me. I would have had to live this life of a nomad, never staying in one spot, lying about my identity, and leaving whenever things got shady. I couldn't see my family or friends again, and if I did try to contact them, I would be found, and something terrible would happen. I would have to be all in, if that's what I wanted to do. No bail. But back to the present of me talking to this guy. That answer always kind of stuck to me. It probably made sense that I wouldn't have lasted long and got hooked on drugs or probably got some kind of disease. Fast forward a few weeks and I had a dream. It was probably one of the scariest dreams I would ever have. And considering that I usually have dreams where I die, and a lot of them are nightmares, I hope this has some credibility to it. It was one of those dreams where I knew what was going to happen before anything happened, almost like I had already gone through the dream once, and I was going through the whole thing again. I found myself exiting a car and walking up to a target house. It was my first assignment. My boss had told me that if I did this well, I would be accepted into their group, and if I did more assignments, I would earn privileges. For those of you not getting the cues, it means I had to kill whoever was in the house. I reluctantly walked up to the front door, knowing what I had to do. This is where it all starts, I thought to myself in the dream. As I rang the doorbell to get inside, I felt odd to say the least. I knew what I was doing was wrong and didn't really want to go through with it, but I felt compelled to do it since it technically already happened, and I was only replaying what already happened before. My feet were heavy, my arms were stiff. I took a breath and blew away the anxiety, and calmed down before I made a move. I could not quite get over how oddly familiar everything around me was. Yes, I have lived through it before, but even the first time going through it was somehow familiar. The door opened and an unfamiliar face showed itself to me. An older man in his 60s. I was about to ask if I could enter but was interrupted by the man as he nearly collapsed with the joy of seeing me, hugged me and invited me in, and ushered me into the living room, where he shouted to his wife, who was also in the house, and audibly happy to hear of my arrival too. I thought to myself the time to strike was nearly upon me, and in my pocket I could feel my weapons. I thought to myself about the other assignment that I had taken before as well, and specifically remembered 2 other houses where I had entered into and gotten away with what I'd done. They were both single-member houses and surprisingly easy, but something about this was different. I looked around the house and all I could feel was warmth and love. I was about to end that and replace it with cold and bitterness, and I looked at the old man who was continuously facing away from me. Could I really go through with this? I had the scene playing in my head. The house would be one of the worst crime scenes the city had ever seen. The horrific scene that investigators would never see again with this brutality. The more time went by, the more and more I couldn't do it. My eyes got blurry and saturated in tears, and collapsed, saying I couldn't go through with it. Both of the elderlies came to help me and were worried about my state. I told them everything, showed them my weapon, and that I was sent there to end them. And that how, because I refused to do my job, there was someone parked a few streets down that was going to come and terminate me in their place for not cooperating with the job. I feared for my life, but decided to stay and fight for these people, and was resolved to write them a new destiny. The man walked up the sidewalk to the house. I had taken too long. He was pissed. He knew I had caved. I pointed out the window and said that the guy was coming for me. The old lady had told me to hide in the other room and that she would answer the door. The old man hid me in the room and just stood out of eyesight of the door when it opened. The last thing I remember before I woke up from this dream was the door knocking and the old lady opening the door. I had woken up crying in my bed. My tears had gotten soaked all over the pillow that I had to wash them later. I didn't know who these people were, but it unsettled me so much that I was in an unfamiliar house with unfamiliar people, and yet I had so much empathy for them. I was bursting in tears. After this dream, I went to the same medium again, and asked him who these people were. I didn't actually tell him anything about the dream aside from the question. Who were the old people in my dream? Not even an old couple, just the old people. Without missing a beat, he replies, "They were your parents." I walked out after he said that. My heart was sitting somewhere below my stomach for the next several hours, and every time I thought about this dream for a long time, it still sinks when I think about it. It wasn't such a terrible dream, but I know in my heart that I would have done this if I had chosen that other path. I'd like to believe that this dream was showing me what would have happened to me had I chosen the other path. I have no idea, in all honesty, if that's true, but right now, the only form of consolence that I have about this experience is that I chose not to go through with what happened in the dream. I have the wonderful knowledge of knowing that I turned the dude down and have no worries about the alternate reality of mine, but it hurts a lot to know that it was a possibility, and to be honest, if that were the life I had, I have no regrets looking at it now and knowing that I would be dead before I was 27. I love my parents. I want to start by saying that I'm a 21-year-old male from Canada. I have chronic insomnia and have had since I was 8 or 9. That's when my lucid nightmares began. I call them lucid nightmares because it was almost like a lucid dream, but I can't control too much aside from myself, and the fact that I have very vivid, unrealistic dreams to the point where if I get hit in the dream, I'll wake up with a bruise or a mark, sometimes bleeding, like I was in my nightmare. I know this sounds like a lot of BS, but I've got no reason to lie. I've had sleep tests done, and I've tried lots of different sleeping medication and none of them seems to make it stop, or even lessen it at all. My doctor has no idea, neither does my dad, or any of the sleep technicians. I've had many sleep tests done. They say it's in my head, but can't explain why the physical harm is there when I wake up. It starts with me waking up in this wooded area like a forest, but way more than trees than what normal forests are like, and it's dark and I can barely see. I also don't have my glasses, which is odd. I normally need them, but here I don't. I can see very well, and I hear a scream and I get scared, so I start waking up and looking around and then I hear it. My dad's calling for me, and he sounds confused and scared, which is unlike him. He's 6'4", covered in tattoos, and doesn't take anything from anyone. It's weird to hear him distressed. I head in the direction of his voice and find this thing. I don't really know how to describe it, standing at around 5'11", but on 4 feet and not bipedal. It was white and looked kind of scary like an iguana, and it was very humanoid, but backward, so its back was where its stomach would be, and it was hunched over like it was a crab walking. Most terrifyingly is that it was mimicking the voices of people I knew, and it had no face, just blank, but I could tell it was looking at me. Well, at least my direction. That's when it just ran, and I mean faster than I had ever seen anything move, let alone something that looks like it shouldn't be able to move that quickly. As it moves, it screams like it's in pain. It is the most awful sound I've ever heard. Writing this now, I can still hear it. It gives me chills and makes me wish I could forget that god-awful sound. My dream does not have a happy ending. It did catch me, and this thing began cutting me with human-like nails and screeched. Then, these weird-looking flying things about the size of a wine glass come out of where its face should be, and they start to consume me. And as I perish, I wake up sore, covered in bug bites, and my dad was trying to wake me because he needed me to watch the dogs while he went to look at a place. That was a week ago now. I've barely slept and have been working to keep me going crazy. I'm freaking out. No one believes me. But when I tell my dad, he thinks I'm mad. Honestly, I don't blame him. Just typing this all out and reading it feels crazy. They aren't spider bites. The doctors say they don't look like that. And the burns, it feels like I was burned. I have an appointment tomorrow to see what they make of it, and I will update you if you want. As unreal as it sounds, this is one of my nightmares. I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow, and I'm eager to see what they say. But until now, I don't know what the hell is making this happen. Hey guys, it's Mort here. Thank you so much for listening. Well done for making it to the end of the recording. I applaud and thank you for getting to the end. It really means the world to me, just listening to the videos. I'd love to hear what you thought of these sleep paralysis and dream stories. I haven't done this topic, I think, in about 1.5 years, because finding the stories is quite difficult for some topics, especially if not a lot of people watch the video. It really makes me less inclined to want to do it again. But I hope that you guys liked it, and your comments and support, reading it down below, would really mean a lot if you want to see this kind of stuff again. I just wanted to do a few obscure things that we haven't done in a while. So there you go. Just a quick reminder again, for anyone who is interested in cool Patreon stuff, the stickers, the letter, the exclusive content, you can find it all in the top of the description. It's, of course, really appreciated, and I hope you like what you receive in the mail. And as you can see, the names are on screen, so thank you to my members and my patrons who really help keep everything running smoothly. You guys are the best. If you want to see more content, by the way, the links are on screen now, if you're not really done yet. But I am personally going to wrap things up here, because I'm probably going to go to sleep. So stay awesome, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one, hopefully. Bye!